Blessed afternoon, everyone. I am Princess Erica Estela Cruz, your discussant at this moment, and I will be discussing my topic entitled The Rule of Safavid. Rise of the Safavid Dynasty. After the collapse of the Empire of Tamerlane in the early 15th century, the area extending from Persia into Central Asia fell into anarchy. At the beginning of the 16th century, however, a new dynasty known as the Safavids took control. Unlike many of their Islamic neighbors, who were Sunni Muslims, the Safavids became ardent Shiites. As discussed in Chapter 3, the Sunnis and Shiites were the two major groups in the Islamic religion. The Safavid dynasty was founded by Ismail, the descendant of Safi al-Din, thus the name Safavid. In the early 14th century, Safi al-Din had been the leader of a community of Turkish ethnic groups in the Azerbaijan near the Caspian Sea. In 1501, Ismail used his forces to seize much of the Iran and Iraq. He then called himself the Shah or king of a new Persian state. Ismail sent Shiite preachers into Anatolia to convert members of Turkish tribes in the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Sultan tried to halt this activity, but Ismail refused to stop. He also ordered the massacre of Sunni Muslims when he conquered Baghdad in 1508. Alarmed by these activities, the Ottoman Sultan Selim I advanced against the Safavids in Persia and won a major battle near Tabriz. However, Selim could not maintain control of the area. A few years later, Ismail regained Tabriz. During the following decades, the Safavids tried to consolidate their rule throughout Persia and in areas to the west. Faced with the problem of integrating various Turkish peoples with the settled Persian-speaking population of the urban areas, the Safavids used the Shiite faith as a unifying force. Like the Ottoman Sultan, the Shah himself claimed to be the spiritual leader of all Islam. In the 1580s, the Ottoman went on the attack. They placed Azerbaijan under Ottoman rule and controlled the Caspian Sea with their fleet. This forced the new Safavid Shah Abbas to sign a peace treaty in which he lost much territory. The capital of the Safavids was moved from the northern western city of Tabriz to the more centrally located city of Isfahan. In the early 17th century, Shah Abbas moved against the Ottomans to regain lost territories. He was helped by European states whose leaders viewed the Safavids as useful allies against their chief enemies, the Ottoman Turks. The Safavid had some initial success, but they could not hold all their territorial gains against the Ottoman armies. Nevertheless, in 1612, a peace treaty was signed that returned Azerbaijan to the Safavids. After the death of Shah Abbas in 1629, the Safavid dynasty gradually lost its vigor. Most of his successors lacked his talent and political skills. The power of Shiite religious elements began to increase at the court and in Safavid society at large. While intellectual freedom had marked the height of the empire, the pressure to conform to traditional religious beliefs called religious orthodoxy increased. For example, Persian women who had considerable freedom during the early empire were now forced into seclusion and required to adopt the wearing of the veil. In the early 18th century, during the reign of Shah Hussein, Afghan people invaded and seized the capital of Isfahan. The remnants of the Safavid ruling family were forced to retreat to Azerbaijan. Glory and decline. Under Shah Abbas, who ruled from 1588 to 1629, the Safavids reached the high point of their glory. A system similar to that of the Janissaries in the Ottoman Empire was created to train administrators to run the kingdom. Shah Abbas also strengthened his army, which he armed with the latest weapons. And by the year of 1700, the Safavid Empire had lost much of its strength. And we have here the compare and contrast between Ottoman Empire and Safavid Empire using a Venn diagram. And their original homeland, the Turks took advantage of the situation to seize territories along the western border. Persia sank into a long period of political and social anarchy. In addition, both the Ottomans and the Safavids created strong empires. Political and social structures. Persia under the Safavids was a mixed society. The Safavids had come to power with the support of nomadic Turkish groups, but the majority of the people were Persian. Most of them were farmers or townspeople. The combination of Turkish and Persian elements affected virtually all aspects of Safavid society. The Safavid political system, like that in most empires, was organized in the shape of a pyramid. The Shah was at the top, the bureaucracy and landed were in the middle, and the common people were below. The role of the Shah. The Safavid rulers were eagerly supported by Shiites, who believed that the founder of the empire, Ismail, was a direct successor of the Prophet Muhammad. In return, the Shahs declared Shia Islam to be the state religion. Visitors reported that the Shahs were more available to their subjects than were rulers elsewhere. They show great familiarity to the strangers, remarked one visitor, and even to their own subjects, eating and drinking with them pretty freely. Indeed, the Shahs even had their physical features engraved inside drinking cups so that the people throughout their empire would know them. Strong-minded Shahs firmly controlled the power of the land aristocracy. The Shahs seized the large landed estates of the aristocrats and brought them under the control of the crown. In addition, appointment to senior positions in the bureaucracy was based on merit rather than birth. To avoid competition between Turkish and non-Turkish elements, Shah Abbas, for example, hired a number of foreigners from neighboring countries for positions in his government. Economy and trade. The Safavid Shah played an active part in trade and manufacturing activity. There was also a large and affluent urban middle class involved in trade. Most goods in the empire traveled by horse or camel caravans. Although the road system was poor, the government provided resting places for weary travelers. In times of strong rulers, the roads were kept fairly clear of thieves and bandits. At its height, Safavid Persia was a worthy successor to the great Persian empires of the past. However, it was probably not as prosperous as its neighbors to the east and west. The Mongols and the Ottomans, hemmed in by the sea power of the Europeans to the south and the land power of the Ottomans to the west, the Safavids found trade with Europe difficult. Safavid culture. Knowledge of science, medicine, and mathematics under the Safavids was equal to that of other societies in the region. In addition, Persia witnessed an extraordinary flowering of the arts during the reign of Shah Abbas from 1588 to 1629. The capital of Vespasian, built by Shah Abbas, was a grandiose planned city with wide spaces and a sense of order. Palaces, mosques, and bazaars were arranged around a massive polo ground. The immense mosques were richly decorated, and the palaces were delicate structures with slender wooden columns. To adorn the building, craftspeople created imaginative metalwork, elaborate tiles, and delicate glass vessels. Much of the original city still stands and is a gem of modern-day Iran. Silk weaving based on new techniques flourished throughout the empire. The silks were a brilliant color with silver and gold threads. The weavings portrayed birds, animals, and flowers. Above all, carpet weaving flourished, stimulated by the great demand for Persian carpets in the West. Made primarily of wool, these carpets are still highly prized all over the world. Persian painting enjoyed a long tradition which continued in the Safavid era. Riza-e-Abbasi, the most famous artist of this period, created exquisite works on simple subjects such as oxen plowing, hunters, and lovers. Soft colors and flowing move were the dominant features of the painting of this period. And that ends my topic. Thank you and God bless.